Hey everyone, it's Ashley. Thank you so much for joining me again today on the Pinkfresh Studios YouTube channel. Today we are going to be focusing on the liquid watercolors from Pinkfresh, and we're going to be creating this really beautiful no-line watercolored wreath. This wreath is from the Eucalyptus Fantasy stamp and die set, and it's one of my favorites. I decided to focus on sort of an intense watercolor video today because sometimes people have favorites as far as watercolors go, maybe in the tubes or in the pans, but I wanted to show you why the liquid watercolors are especially nice as well. So for my ink, I'm going to be using the Ink on 3 Fade Out ink, and this is what I use mostly for no-line watercoloring or no-line coloring of any kind. And I'm using the Emerald City liquid watercolor from Pinkfresh. Now I'm just taking a few drops and dropping it into this well here on this paint palette. The rest of the paints around are dried, so that's how I'll be able to tell the difference. I'm also going to use some clean water, and I'm going to bring in this absorber just to be able to dab off my paintbrush when I need to. I got this from Walmart. It was suggested to me by Callie Person, and then I heard Laura Basson mention it in one of her videos, and I thought, well, if these two love it, then it's got to be good. So I went and grabbed it, and I do not regret it. It's great for all your crafting needs, so I would definitely go pick one up. I think it was like 10 bucks at Walmart in the car section, the auto repair section. So you saw that I went ahead and stamped that twice, and the reason that I do that is so that I can see it a little bit better. I find that one stamped image with this ink is a little hard for me to see, and I also find that stamping it twice doesn't make it any more visible when you do your no-line watercoloring, so I like to do it twice. So you can see here how I get that faded look. I'm going to first, I'm going to dip my damp watercolor or my paintbrush into the watercolor. So this is picking up the most saturation. That watercolor in the pan is not diluted with any water whatsoever. So that's going to be the most intense saturation. I'm then going to go ahead and dip the paintbrush into the clean water and dab it off on my absorber just to make sure that I get a little bit of water. I'm going to blend that original high saturation down a little bit and repeat this step 2 to 3 times on each tiny little eucalyptus here. That's what gives you the really nice fade out and what will give you the nice, also sort of like it'll show the parameters of each eucalyptus or the lines. When you go for that high saturation at first, you're going to actually follow the lines. That way it will bring attention into that and create the contrast there. So again, starting a new one here, I'm just going to take a damp brush, pick up just the watercolor with no water in it at all. And then I'm going to create my darkest section where it's going to be the most shaded, dip that into the clean water, pat that off on my absorber, bring that saturation down a bit, repeat that again 2 or 3 times until I am happy with how it looks. Now I'm going to go ahead and speed this up just so that you can see sort of more of it come to life. I'm going to put on just a little bit of music so that you can enjoy watching this, but I'll be back in just a second to show you how I add even more detail in here. So I'm coming back in now just to show you how I create a little bit more detail to these eucalyptus leaves, I think they are. So I'm going to dry off my brush on my absorber, pick up that intense saturation that's just the watercolor with no water in it, and I'm going to create again that shading on the very top. So I'm following the line to give it this circular shape, and even though it fades out to almost a barely there color, your eye will complete each leaf because you've added the highlight with that shading and the extra shading that we're doing now. So I'm also taking that saturation or the watercolor, just the watercolor, and bringing it in from the top of the leaf just to create that little line that you get at the very top, almost like the part that's growing out of the branch. So I'm going to go ahead and do it again here. So I bring in just a tiny little line at the very top and then create that circular shape at the very top of the leaf. I'm even going to bring that watercolor that's in the pan down a little bit to the sides because again, I want your eye just to finish creating and putting together the leaf when you look at it. So it's easier to do that when you create more of the shape. I don't want to bring it all the way around because that wouldn't be cohesive with the highlight that we put in there. But if I come down just a bit, you can see that it just looks like the highlight is taking over the very end of that leaf. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up again so that you can see that come together, and I'll be back in just a minute. Whenever I show a no-line watercoloring technique, I like to pan out. And this is because it doesn't always look great when you're hovered right over it or when you're very close, like how I put the camera when I'm doing a tutorial. So I wanted to pan out a bit so that you can see what it looks like when it's all coming together. I recently went to one of the coloring road trips with Kathy Rakusin, and she gives away a clipboard in that road trip, on that class, so that you can color on it and then sort of hold it up and out in front of you, because again, when you're huddled over it so closely, it doesn't look as great as it does, or you can see all of your tiny mistakes. So when you come out a bit and you look at it as a whole, it ends up looking much nicer, and you don't get so discouraged. So I'm coming to the completion of the watercoloring portion after I add a little bit more detail in there like I showed you just before. And now I'm going to add the details in with the branches. I don't want these to look like they're just floating, so I'm going to use Espresso, which is a brown liquid watercolor from Pinkfresh, and I'm just going to put a tiny bit of that on my palette, pick it up with a number 2 brush, and I'm just going to create some really fine lines in between these leaves and sort of close them in together so that it looks like they are attached rather than just sort of hanging here and levitating in midair. I'm going to start creating my card now, and I'm using a piece of craft cardstock, and I'm taking the Sparkle with Magic stamp set, which is one from the newer release, and I'm taking just the frame of it. I love this frame. It's perfect for a 4 by 5¼ piece of cardstock, which I usually use for my card fronts, and it just frames it in so nicely, and I love it. So I'm just going to emboss that. So to do that, I'm just going to take an embossing buddy, which is just a bunch of powder, just to make sure that my embossing powder only sticks to where I'm stamping, and I'm using Versamark ink to ink up and stamp this frame. Now it fits really nicely right into the center there just to frame this card front. I'm using some white embossing powder to bring that to life. I'm going to take my heat tool now to make sure that I set this, and you want to make sure that it gets really hot so that you get less warping. But if you do get a little bit of warping, you're just going to want to turn your cardstock around and hit the very back of it with your heat tool, and that should take out most of the warping there. That's just a fun little tip if you're interested. So I'm going to center this here, and again, I just think that the frame brings it in all really nice together, and I've used the Be Merry die sentiment from the Classic Holiday Words die set, and I love this because it comes with a really nice fine sentiment and then a shadow dye as well. To adhere the wreath, I used foam tape, and then to adhere the dye sentiment, I used very tiny strips of foam tape behind the actual letters so that they were hidden from the vellum, because you would see it there through the vellum. I really love the way that this turned out, and I think that the no-line watercoloring, especially with the craft cardstock, just sort of makes it feel that much more homemade and made with love. I hope that you've enjoyed the video and gotten some helpful tips of how you can use the Pinkfresh liquid watercolors in your crafting. As always, links to all of the products are in the description, and I will see you again next time. Thanks so much. Bye.